Ever wondered what people ate in the Middle Ages? No, it wasn't giant turkey legs and fancy goblets like in the movies. What you ate back then mostly depended on who you were. If you were rich, you got meat and sweets. If you were poor, well, you got onions. Lots of onions. Food wasn't just about staying alive. It showed who had power, what people believed, and how they lived. Some meals lasted for hours. Others were just boiled mush eaten with your hands. In this video, we're diving into the strange, messy world of medieval food. We'll look at what peasants and kings ate, the weirdest food jobs, why beer was safer than water, and how people followed food rules based on religion and the seasons. Let's get into it. If you were a regular person in the Middle Ages, a peasant, your meals were simple. And by simple, we mean the same food, every single day. Most meals started and ended with pottage, a thick, mushy stew made by tossing whatever you had into a pot. Beans, onions, leeks, maybe a turnip if you were lucky. This pot usually sat over the fire all day, with new stuff thrown in as it came. Think of it like medieval slow cooker leftovers. Forever. Bread was a big deal too, but it wasn't the soft, fluffy kind we know today. It was heavy, dark, and made from barley or rye, grains that didn't taste great but filled you up. Peasants didn't use forks. They ate with their hands, spoons, and knives. No fancy table settings, just a wooden bowl and maybe a crusty old spoon passed down from grandma. As for drinks, thanks to dirty rivers and no toilets, people mostly drank small ale, a weak beer that was a safer choice than water. It wasn't exciting, but it kept you going. And in the Middle Ages, staying alive was already a full-time job. Now, if you were rich in the Middle Ages, like a noble, a lord, or royalty, your plate looked very different. While peasants were boiling turnips, the upper class was throwing giant feasts with food that looked more like art than dinner. Their meals had lots of meat, roast pork, venison, beef, and fancy birds like swan and peacock. Yes, really. And it wasn't just about taste, it was about showing off. Big meals meant big power. They also used spices, which came from faraway places and cost a fortune. So adding spices to a dish was basically saying, "Look how rich I am." Some feasts had up to 30 courses, each more over the top than the last. And for dessert, they served subtleties, sculptures made of sugar or almond paste shaped like castles, dragons, or even people. Before and after meals, nobles washed their hands with perfumed water, served in silver bowls. Manners mattered, at least at the rich table. While peasants ate to survive, the upper class ate to impress. For them, food wasn't just fuel, it was a show. And if you were lucky enough to be invited, you better not slurp. Some foods in the Middle Ages were eaten by just about everyone. Others, only the super rich could afford them. Let's start with the basics. Most people, rich or poor, ate things like bread, cabbage, peas, fish, and of course, ale. These were the go-to foods that filled you up and were easy to find or grow. But when it came to luxury, things got wild. Sugar was a huge deal. It was so rare and expensive that only the richest people had it, and they used it a lot, even in meat dishes. Same with spices like pepper, cinnamon, and saffron. These had to be brought in from faraway lands, which made them crazy expensive. So the more spice you used, the more people knew you had money. And here's a fun fact. There were no tomatoes, potatoes, or chocolate in medieval Europe. These didn't show up until after people started exploring the Americas. Feeding people in the Middle Ages took a lot of work and a lot of different jobs. Some were cool, others were downright gross. In big castles and rich houses, there were huge kitchens with whole teams running the show. The head cook was the boss, but under them were people who chopped, stirred, and served, kind of like a medieval fast food crew, but slower and sweatier. There were bakers too. Most villages had big communal ovens, because not everyone had one at home. But baking bread wasn't free. Bakers could even get fined for using too much firewood. Women known as alewives brewed ale at home and sold it in their towns. It was one of the few jobs women could do for money until men took over the beer business later on. Some jobs were just weird, like the spit turner, a person who had to sit near a hot fire for hours, slowly spinning meat on a stick. Imagine doing that all day. There were also foragers hunting for mushrooms and herbs, fish sellers, butchers, and cheese vendors at the market. In medieval times, food didn't just appear. Someone probably sweated, baked, or bled to make it happen. In the Middle Ages, food wasn't just food. It was tied to religion, seasons, and strange beliefs. For starters, people fasted, a lot. The church had over 100 fasting days a year where you couldn't eat meat, dairy, or eggs, but fish? Totally allowed. So even on no-meat days, rich folks found ways to eat well, like serving fish shaped like bacon or sneaking in almond milk cheese. Big feasts were saved for holy days and special events, like a Saint's Day or a harvest festival. These meals weren't just about eating, they were a way to show thanks, celebrate, and sometimes even show off. People also believed that food had temperatures, not like hot or cold, but whether a food made your body warm or cool. Meat gave you strength, vegetables were considered weak. Yep, being into salad wasn't a thing. Food followed the seasons. If it wasn't growing, you didn't need it. There were no fridges, no grocery stores, and no imported strawberries in winter. And if you were poor and hungry, monasteries sometimes gave out food to travelers and the sick. It was part charity, part religion, and sometimes the only meal people got. In the Middle Ages, when and how people ate was just as different as what they ate. Most people didn't eat 3 meals a day. Instead, they had 2, one in the late morning and one in the evening. Breakfast wasn't really a thing, unless you were old, sick, or doing hard labor. Otherwise, eating early was seen as greedy. Peasants usually ate sitting on low stools or the ground, using rough wooden bowls and spoons. No tablecloths, no napkins, just whatever you had. Rich folks, though, they had long, decorated feasting tables with servants, silverware, and music in the background. There were no plates. Instead, people ate off trenchers, which were thick slices of stale bread. These soaked up the juices from meat and stew. Afterward, they were either eaten or given to the poor. At fancy tables, manners mattered. No elbows on the table, no licking your fingers, and definitely no slurping. Sharing was common. 2 people might use the same cup or knife, so being polite wasn't just good manners, it kept you from losing friends. Every meal told a story about your class, your beliefs, and how much power you had at the table. Medieval food was more than just eating. It was about status, survival, and belief. What you ate showed how powerful you were. It showed if you followed the church, if you had money, or if you were just trying to get through another hard winter. Some of their ideas sound silly today, like thinking vegetables made you weak or using bread as a plate. But back then, it all made sense. People did the best they could with what they had. Now imagine trying to explain avocado toast or almond milk lattes to a medieval baker. Their head would probably explode. So, could you survive on pottage, boiled turnips, and weak beer? Or would you trade your kingdom for a pizza? Let us know in the comments, and make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss more weird, wild stories from the past. See you in the next one.